What happens when a two-person team is tasked with marketing 40 communities across the country? Meet the marketing director who's not just doing it, but redefining the strategy for everyone else.
Welcome to From Leads to Leases, a CCR growth podcast that helps senior living providers transform their complex challenges into opportunities. Listen in for stories from industry leaders, innovative strategies, and insights. And with our expertise, learn how to increase occupancy faster, guaranteed.
Welcome back to another episode of From Leads to Leases, the podcast that dives deep into the senior living and senior care industries, bringing you insights, strategies, and stories from the experts at the forefront of marketing, sales, operations, and innovation. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. For those of you who don't know about us, CCR Growth is a full-service marketing and growth agency that's exclusive to the senior living industry. And through this podcast, I'm here to guide you through the evolving landscape of the senior care industry, helping communities connect with the families and residents they serve in more meaningful and effective ways that truly impact your bottom line. All right, today's guest is someone who knows the senior living experience from every angle, literally. Starting her journey in culinary services and caregiving, she's now leading the marketing charge for nearly 40 communities across the country. She's creative, she's strategic, and most importantly, she's human. Meg Harper is on a mission to ensure senior living marketing doesn't just generate leads, it builds trust. And in today's conversation, we're diving into what it means to truly humanize digital marketing, how she's reshaping content strategy, improving lead nurturing, and closing the gap between marketing and sales in powerful ways. So, Meg, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Being a marketer myself, obviously, these are some of my favorite conversations. So I'm excited to get into it. As a marketer built from the ground up, you've held nearly every role in senior living: culinary, caregiver, sales director, and now you're leading marketing for nearly 40 communities. How has your path shaped your approach to marketing today?
I think it started with really my first role, not just in senior living, but in general. And I started in the culinary department at our local nursing home. Now, I grew up in small town rural Iowa, so there wasn't a whole lot of opportunities as far as your first job. It was, local Dairy Queen, Fairway, or the nursing home, essentially. And, I really wanted to choose a course for my life that directly impacted people in a positive light. I've always chosen, the service industry in a way where, I'm making that impact, right? And I'm able to see that tangible value that my role has. And so I started in culinary, worked in the culinary department for about a year and a half, and then switched into direct support. And I actually worked with a home health company. So I was working in both 24-hour house positions and kind of as needed PRN support. Nothing too clinical, but more so just an individual to be there to provide more of the mental support, the emotional support, and the physical as needed. And I felt, truly touched by the impact that I was making in the lives of the elder community. And I felt, going into college when I chose my career path, it aligned with my skill set, right? I chose PR, communications, marketing, and advertising. And that's what I'm good at. That's what I enjoy doing. But truly, it was important to me to find an industry where I could then align that strategy with a direct impact on the lives of other individuals. And so senior living just felt like a natural fit. I continued working in caregiving throughout college. And then, my first role was actually within the coordinator team, a sales director. So I got to step into more so of, the insight into the decision-making process of prospects and family members. So you combine that with the firsthand experience on the front lines with, that deep empathy and respect for what our community team members really go through on a daily basis. Sure. And then add in that understanding and expertise of what our prospects and family members go through on a daily basis. I'm able to then take both of those situational, applications and really take that and apply it to my marketing strategy. And in a way, I suppose it's really helped me translate our copy and our messaging, our storytelling into a more genuine and human approach to how I generate and navigate those conversations. So I guess I'm always thinking, would this message make sense to someone walking into this community? And I'm able to answer that question myself, having been in most of our communities, if not all of them, for a specific set of time. And I've even worked in some of our communities. So I'm able to answer that question in a way that maybe our other, members of a marketing team might not be able to.
That's great. I mean, there's a similar question that I typically stress for the prospects looking for either their loved one or for themselves is, can I see myself here, or can I see mom or dad here? So being able to see it from that side of the coin. I just had an interview with an executive director who had a marketing background, and I asked her, I was like, who's more suited for an executive director role? Is it someone who has that experience in marketing, or is it someone who has more of an operational background? And she's like, marketing all the way. And I think it's really just because you're able to humanize, you're able to understand that side of it. You're able to tell the story of why someone would want to move into one of your communities, and what are the benefits of that, and being able to articulate that in such an important way. So I love that you've worked all these different roles. You've seen every corner of the industry. So you have this great perspective, I think, which helps you lead the team. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. We say all the time that our directors are the sales leaders of our buildings. And so the business acumen, it's important, right? Especially for those of
Yeah,
us
for sure.
who don't understand it as much. I think that's important, but I absolutely agree that they have to have some sort of experience in sales and marketing or the service industry, or even we've hired individuals with experience in social work, and just having the situational awareness of how to communicate and navigate a user journey, a family's journey.
Yeah, there's the business side of senior living, and then there's the housing side of senior living, right? Are we in business to make money? Or are we in business to provide housing for seniors as well as make money? So there's that duality there. And I think the marketing side is great at bridging that gap. When you first joined, were there some immediate gaps that you saw in the marketing strategy?
As a sales director, we say sales director, but it's really sales and marketing director, right? My role really encompassed brand management, graphic design, lead generation, as well as more of the general outreach, leading tours, the user journey, move-in coordination. But I felt like I didn't maybe get as much insight into the marketing side of the industry and the expectations there. I had that knowledge, so I knew where to start and what to do and how to apply my skills. But, I became maybe a resource for some of my fellow sister communities within the portfolio. And they would come to me and say, hey, I have this idea for a flyer and I don't know what to do. How do I start it? Where do I start? And I'm like, I'll do that for you. And I started kind of taking on some of these tasks. And, my regional at the time came to me and she's like, I appreciate you wanting to help out, but they've got to figure this out for themselves. And I said, well, do they? Like, should they have to figure that out for themselves? Or is it up to the corporate team to have that expertise and to provide that resource? And so I think, it goes many different ways in our industry. Some outsource to agencies, some have a corporate marketing team. And at the time just had an internal communications head. And it wasn't necessarily someone who had that expertise in, copywriting, graphic design, lead generation, digital marketing. And so I pitched myself and I said, I'll do it. Like, just, put me in, coach, and I know what to do and I know where to get started because I've seen the gaps in the communities. And so they did. I started the marketing department. And really built it from the ground up. And what was important to me to stress was to ensure that our communities really had the support at the corporate level within graphic design, brand management, and digital marketing. And those were the three areas that I really stressed as important. And to do that first, we really had to develop the brand voice. And that hadn't yet been done yet either. We had just rebranded, and it was essentially a logo and a color palette. And so that was my first course of action, was to really define the identity of the brand and then apply that identity to the sub-brands that we have across our communities. We started with a wonderful website redesign, everyone's favorite project. And
Yeah.
And it went really well. I'm very happy with the results of what we were able to create once we really aligned on, what's our mission, our core values, what does it mean to be a managed or owned community. So that was my first step, right? Is to really align the brand with our communities that we oversee. And then to step a little bit more into the digital marketing side of things and overseeing the marketing strategy that maybe was or was not happening with the current partners, and to really just reevaluate how we were spending dollars. So that applied to current digital advertising dollars. It applied to current traditional advertising strategies, and to really just be the expert to say, you're not getting the return on the investment here. You're not getting the qualified leads. If you were, this is what it would look like. And I know what to do from here to help you. You don't have to figure it out on your own.
That's great to be able to say if it were working, you would see these results. So
Right.
clearly something needs to change. That's great. I know it's challenging too, working with so many sub brands like you do, because you're trying to keep the identity of each community unique, right? But you're still overseeing all of the corporate communication and all of the assets for all of these communities. I mean, how do you manage all of that?
Yeah, it was important to us when, we rebranded. We were okay with flexible brand guidelines. So here's the framework of the identity and our sub community brands. Make it your own. Honor and empower the local teams to maintain what they've established in their local communities, because that's what a majority of our communities are. They're in tertiary markets with small town living, and they have been a cornerstone of the community for quite some time. And so we felt it was important to be able to allow them to maintain that brand integrity while also providing a format for what exactly is your brand and what does it stand for. And this is the name, but it goes beyond that. And here's what we're providing to you to kind of navigate through that story and make it your own, but align with these expectations. And what we found is that we were then allowing communities to tell their own stories, but it was creating a shared tone and visual style that was important to us now that we had developed the brand much further.
I love that. It's so important for, like you were saying, the smaller communities that have been established, or smaller like tertiary markets, that we have some communities we manage that they've been there for 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden, if there's a name change, that's a huge issue. There's such brand recognition there. I mean, if I look at the digital marketing for some of these communities, 30, 40% of their traffic is people searching the community by name. So if you take that away, that's going to change things significantly.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
love that.
We had to really accept that it's not about us. It's about the community teams, and it's okay to take a back seat and be the support piece and the support factor, but it does help, I think, with less of that corporate presence in some of the smaller communities. They seem to respect and honor that is okay again with taking that back seat.
One of the great concepts that you've coined is humanizing digital marketing. I love that. What does that mean to you, and what inspired that shift?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about redesigning the website and the process for that. And I joke because, it is time consuming and tasking, but it truly was a process that I enjoyed because it was important to me to make sure that our digital touch points at every aspect of the journey felt genuine, warm, and less of more of the transactional clinical facility approach that you would, generally see across this industry. Previously, we had, a website that was just much of a templated style. Maybe there was a format, a process for the user flow of visiting the website and then converting, but it felt, like I said, more transactional. There wasn't that investment into the brand, into what we stand for and who they should be expecting to hear from and what that conversation would entail. And so it was important to me to really set up those conversations with as much positive intent on both sides as possible. And that started with really mimicking in-person connection, even online, to be able to say, how would a conversation generally go with a salesperson? What are the things we would want to focus on? Well, let's do that here. And so within the homepage, we provide resources, but resources also with support and guidance of, it's okay if you don't know where to go from here. That's what we're here for. Let's look at this first and go through these steps. If you have, visited our website, you're here for a reason. What's that reason? Let's talk through it. Kind of, impression that we're hoping to now leave. And that shift was really inspired, one, by the previous website, but also by watching how families start their journey with us online and where they were navigating, what questions they were asking that they maybe weren't getting answers to, and so they were dropping off. And so we really were able to create that conversation from start to finish of what we really hoped to exude as a brand and through that human connection.
There's not recent, but a statistic around search users and their intent. And I think it's somewhere between 60 to 70% of search users are looking for more information. They're not ready to buy in this moment. And I think we forget sometimes that the website, especially in this industry, just because I think we're just behind when it comes to a digital presence in general.
Mhm.
Most people, they forget that the website is the first touch point that people have. It's the first experience they have with your brand. And if that is not reflective of what it would be like if somebody walked into that community and met with a sales director or met with the front of house person or the activities coordinator, it's really going to set them back in terms of their overall experience. I love that you're taking that approach. How did that change your lead nurturing strategy and start to shift the outcomes for your communities?
Yeah, so when we moved from more of the generic lacking in emotion or personalization style content and we moved to more personalized and helpful content, we did see an increase in engagement, an increase in conversions, and also an increase in more empowered and informed prospects. They came into the conversation already prepared with the questions that they had to ask, already prepared with the information that they thought they had received from the website. They were prepared to discuss. And so it wasn't maybe more so just that first initial conversation that you would tend to expect of, well, I think I'm looking for independent living. Do you have independent living? And well, what's the price? Because that's generally how it goes. It was more so, I saw on your website that you offer independent living, and I thought that's what my mom needed. But then I saw the description for assisted living, and I think she might need additional support. Can you detail what kind of support you would provide in assisted living that you wouldn't in independent living? And look,
That's
right off the
nice.
bat, we've already developed an answer to one of the most important questions we ask in our
Yeah.
blueprint. And so we're starting to help guide those conversations a little bit further, not to just assist and support our salespeople, but to assist and support the families and their loved ones and the prospects, the seniors who are even still looking for themselves, who, quite, frankly, they don't know where to start. And if it's not our job to tell them where to start, then whose is it? Who's going to provide that insight for them?
I think that's great that you're able to eliminate a step right in the beginning of the process like that. Every single touch point that someone has to make to get further down the funnel, to fill out a form or pick up the phone to call, it exponentially decreases the likelihood that they're actually going to do that action. So when you can eliminate those upfront steps, so somebody feels confident that immediately when they're on that website, they already know what you provide, they already know what the cost is. Now, when they talk to somebody, they can communicate more about maybe their specific situation rather than asking those questions that are already being answered through the website. So
Yeah,
that's pretty awesome
absolutely.
that you're able to do that.
Yeah.
You mentioned that sales teams weren't always aware of the campaigns or the messaging that was influencing those new leads. So what did you do to change that dynamic?
I think it goes back to when I was a sales director in a community and I would get notifications of a new lead coming through, but I'd been sitting at my desk, no phone call had come through, and I was so confused of, wait, it says somebody called, but there was quite literally no phone call. So what is this lead? What is this conversion that you're telling me I just received? And how is it affecting my data? This is not,
Right.
something's not adding up here. And so I said, can I see, a little bit more detail on the campaigns that you're running? Can I see what the copy looks like and what these conversion details that I'm seeing really amount to? And I think it was a question that, hadn't been asked of the corporate team and of the agency because they were not prepared to share that information. And I said, well, that's concerning because, really as a marketing team or even as a salesperson, you should have direct insight and feedback into the content of those campaigns. And it goes back to what I said about our messaging. If it doesn't reflect a genuine experience in the community, it's not accurate, it's misleading, and it should not be advertising. Maybe it's appealing, right? Maybe it gets more leads, but it sets us up for failure ultimately because
Yeah.
we're driving traffic that's not qualified. We're driving a clientele that we can't serve. If we're promoting resort style living and, we're more of, the small hometown community, it does cause some confusion. So that was one of the things that I looked into first when I stepped into my role within the marketing team, was looking into the content and the copy that was being shared within the campaigns, asking those hard questions of my agency to be able to share that information and also accept my feedback of what I wanted changed. And I think that's a question we don't always ask, even currently in this industry. We're not always aware. It was something that was important to me to set that kind of standard from the beginning of our partnership of, no, I'm going to be asking these questions. I want to know to be able to provide feedback. Of course, you maintain that expertise of this won't convert as, as high as this will, or as well, or this will be more expensive because of this. But to be able to have that insight was really important to me. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, if it's important to me, it's got to be important to our sales directors and to our community directors
Absolutely.
who are like, I'm seeing leads come through, but what are they interested in? And why did they choose my community? Can I have more details? And so we really decided to get very specific with our sales directors as far as their access to shared dashboards and their access to me. And so they're able to reach out to me at any time, open communication, right? But I also have open office hours twice per month where they can join at any point through a scheduled hour-long Teams meeting. They can ask me questions. We can go through their dashboard, share conversion rates, share content and keywords, and even, data from their Google business page and how that's performing versus paid traffic. And I will share that information with them if they're interested in it. And you will find that if you do offer that information, the sales directors are intrigued by it and they're open to those conversations. So when I increase that transparency into campaign themes and timing, I think it opened up the door to a more sense of confidence and collaboration among the sales and the marketing teams.
It's such an important point that you bring up. Whether you're working with an outside agency or the internal marketing team themselves, you have got to take ownership over the quality of the leads that are coming in, because I think so many marketing agencies, it's almost like e-commerce to them, right? They're so focused on generating leads. They're like, we got you 1,000 leads last month. We're doing a great job. Yeah, but how many of those are actually qualified? Are these good leads? We've gone through several iterations of that with our clients, and we're like, we need to create a better feedback loop so that they can let us know what the quality of the leads is. And I think for an internal marketing team, having that open dialogue with the sales team to make sure that what you're providing them is doing the job. Do you want to work 1,000 leads and convert 5 of them, or do you want to work 100 leads and convert 10 of them? That's such a huge difference in conversion percentage. But from a marketing side perspective, sometimes we just think more is better, and it really isn't, especially in this industry. I mean, I did a survey last year. I surveyed over 30,000 sales professionals in senior living, and I asked them, how long do you typically spend with a qualified prospect? And over 75% of them said, we spend 15 hours or more with a qualified prospect. So if you have several thousand leads in your pipeline and you're supposed to have a 24-hour response time at the most for a salesperson, how in the world are you going to do that and have meaningful conversations with that many leads? It's just not possible.
It's not, no.
So making sure that you're checking the quality up front and figuring out ways to improve the quality and not necessarily the quantity, I think that's going to be huge for your team. So I'm so glad to hear you say that.
I'm happy to hear you say that the sales leader should be part of that feedback loop as well, because I think that is often a piece of the puzzle that's not included. I'm encouraged to look at the CRM as my source of truth, but it doesn't always tell the full story. And so you do have to have those conversations at the community level. And I think there's always this drive for, well, marketing's not sending enough leads. Well, sales isn't converting on the leads I'm sending them. And I think it goes deeper than that. I think if there is a misalignment between the two, the opportunity stands with both of them to collaborate and to determine a path forward. And if you're not each involved in every single step of the process, then of course there's going to be that divide and segmentation.
Yeah. And there is no one perfect way to look at all of the data that's coming in. I mean, that's the one thing that I found in the last 15 years of working in this industry. You can't just trust the CRM, because the CRM has so much manual input in it. A salesperson may not know the source. They may pick up the phone and talk to someone, but they don't know if that person came from an ad or a organic Google search or maybe a Facebook click, something like that. They just don't know those things. So sometimes that information gets entered incorrectly. So we have to backtrack. So we use call tracking, we use form tracking, chatbot tracking, all of that stuff. So every single lead that gets into the CRM, we then have to manually go and cross-reference it with all of these other platforms to make sure, yes, this was the first touch point. They came through a Google organic search, and then they looked at these 3 pages, and then they converted. And so we're getting like super granular with the information, because it's really important that we know those things. And what that does is it allows us to help our clients make better decisions down the road. Okay, if we want to invest more into one channel, what would that one channel be? Now we know that, say, organic search converts 25% more often than Google ads, we're of course going to invest more into our SEO strategy at that point. So the data tells a story.
It does.
Absolutely.
It does.
And working with the sales team as well, I think the whole sales versus marketing thing, I just think that's such an old concept now. Like, I've reframed that whole process in my mind now, and I just call the acquisitions team because we're all on the same side. We're all here to generate as many leads and convert as many leads as we can for best fit prospects for our communities. That's the goal. We're all on the same team. So if we look at it as an acquisitions department, then the marketing is on the front end, the sales is on the back end, and the sales is handling more of the one-to-one experience, the people who need a little bit more hand holding and aren't really sure. Whereas the marketing team is more of the mass quantity that's coming in. Most of the questions that are getting answered by all of the content that you've put out there, all the storytelling you're doing, all of that kind of stuff. So I think that's a better way to look at it. But that brings me to my next question, which is, what advice do you have for other marketing directors who are still facing that divide between marketing and sales in their
Yeah.
communities?
I think the most important piece, and I think most of us do know this, but maybe need to prioritize it, excuse me, a little bit more, is we need to meet regularly, and there needs to be, no silos between sales and marketing. And I think I've started that within the team to be able to meet with the sales directors and really involve them in conversations, and to the point where, not where it's just about transparency, but to the point where I'm accepting their feedback and aligning my goals and language with their expectations and their goals and language. And are they always going to align? Probably not always. Am I going to have some points of expertise to offer them? Absolutely. But they're going to have the same for me because they're on the ground in their communities and they have the feedback of how those conversations are going based on the campaigns that we're really driving through Google Ads or, through our marketing automation campaign. So I think to be able to give the sales team that opportunity as marketers to offer insight into marketing and then take our expertise into consideration of what pieces of that puzzle can I take and apply to my strategy, and sort of meet in the middle a little bit on the goals and the language to really give the sales team, the confidence and the empowerment that they're contributing. Another thing that's worked well for us as far as the local teams or the community teams go is to be able to provide tools and context that the teams can actually use at the community level. So I spoke a little bit about graphic design and flyers, and that's really important to me, is to be able to be that source for them to generate those materials. But what if, they don't have time or they don't have the ideas to necessarily generate those flyers on their own, and they really need support with their marketing campaign and brainstorming? I now have a shared drive of materials that have worked well for other communities in the past, where they can go through and they can filter through. Maybe they want to do a happy hour event, or they want to do a resident referral campaign, and they can look through for ideas and context of what's worked well for their sister communities and what they could take and apply to their strategies. And then, of course, if they need customizations, they come to me for that as well. But I think to, really reinforce with them that I'm willing to do the work to support them and that we do have a common goal has really been instrumental in developing that relationship.
That's great. That's great. That's good advice for everybody else out there. You have some communities that are pretty close in proximity, right?
Yes, we
How
do.
do you, yeah, I thought so. How do you think about managing messaging and competition when you have multiple communities in close proximity? I mean, we have several communities like that too. And one of the concerns always is cannibalizing the traffic from one to the other. I mean, how do you guys handle that?
Yeah, I think the main thing to stress is there's a difference between close proximity in the Chicago suburbs, and there's a difference between close proximity in rural Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, right? And so
Yeah.
we have some communities who are 15 miles apart in rural Iowa, and the population within a 30-mile radius of those communities is already limiting. And so we have to get very creative with our PPC strategy of geographics and demographics to make sure that we are specific and focusing on the differentiation that each community offers. If there's some, I wouldn't say common sense, but maybe more natural inclinations for the geographics, where you maybe draw a line in between them and this community goes north and this community goes south. And if there are some zip codes maybe where they compete with each other, we tend to be a little bit more strategic in those areas of we do compete against those two communities, but we offer different messaging, different campaign, different strategies to ensure that we're at least targeting the clientele that would choose this community anyway. And so we do have to get very very specific about making sure, especially when you talk about two different ownership groups, that our communities are not pitted against each other in those smaller markets. But we found that really highlighting what makes each community unique and
Yeah.
focusing on those specific geographic areas has really helped. And then we've gone a bit further to really ensure that the two communities are collaborating with each other because yes, they're competitors, but they're also sister communities. Their success, mirrors the other's success. And so if one is full in memory care, they're referring their memory care leads to their sister community 15 miles down the road. And we've really worked to establish those positive relationships between them, which has only really harnessed that, confidence and empowerment to make sure that their community is successful and then share in the success of others as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, we have a couple communities, a pair of communities in Austin, for example, and one is in North Austin, one is in South Austin. So trying to make sure that we're using as many geo-modified keywords as we can that's signifying one is south and one is north, is a challenge. But with us, 90 to 95% of most move-ins happen within a 10-mile radius of the community. They're mostly locals. So we try, if anybody out there is experiencing that, where they have communities that are in close proximity, I'll try to find the neighboring cities that might be on the outskirts of one and then the neighboring cities on the outskirts of the other and start targeting the outside cities too. So not just the one city, because then it starts getting really muddy really fast. But like you were saying too, I mean, making sure that are like complementary services or one can refer to the other, I think is super helpful that they're kind of working together like that. That's really great.
Yeah, I agree. I think you brought up a good point too, where it doesn't always make the most sense to start, with a 15, 20, 30-mile radius around a community. And so it's really important to look at every single community strategy specifically because you might have to do a smaller 10-mile radius and then, some radii around the community. And I think that's something that we probably learned the hard way, is that we had to maybe get much more specific around some of our communities to ensure that we're driving qualified traffic and really making the most of our budgets. So I think that's an important piece to note for some of the corporate marketing teams out there to check in with their agencies.
Yeah, and it can be challenging too because you can't target by zip code anymore if you're running ads. That's considered discrimination in housing. So you have to really just focus on the radius, which is challenging, or specific cities. So you mentioned some exciting growth last time we talked too in the organic and paid search space. What's working for you now that wasn't before?
Yeah, so I mentioned that we really looked at each of our communities and the strategies geographically and the keywords that we've been focusing on and if those represented specifically where, occupancy challenges lay with those communities. So do we need to be focusing more on dementia-specific keywords for memory care traffic and spending a little bit more per, lead that we expect to be receiving? And so we did go through the kind of the hard work of the back end generation to make sure that we're reviewing every single community and the strategies that we have set forth. And then we opted to focus both still on PPC and SEO investments, but we also tried last year smart retargeting campaigns. And so the individuals that, hit the website, they looked through, but they decided not to convert and fell off. We were serving retargeting ads and mailers and OTT campaigns. So display, Facebook, email marketing, and really trying to take advantage of, like you mentioned, it takes multiple touches before somebody determines that they're ready to reach out. Being that reminder of, okay, I know you didn't convert now, but this is a decision that you want to make sooner rather than later. And we saw a majority of that success come from Facebook retargeting, which I was quite surprised by because we don't see a lot of qualified traffic come from just our general Facebook ads. Even boosted posts, boosted events, it's very hit or miss on whether that channel is successful for us. But I was surprised to see that we did see, a significant number of increased conversions from the Facebook retargeting. We also saw some conversions from the direct mail traffic, from the display ads and email. OTT is a little bit harder to track.
Yeah.
But yeah, but
Yep.
overall, we saw a 36% increase in leads, yeah, from 2023 to 2024. And so
That's
something
great.
worked, something went well. And I think with marketing, it's kind of like, yay, this worked. Now, how do we figure out how to duplicate that, but also spend more money in the correct areas so we're not just doing the same thing year over year and hoping that it's still working? And so we pulled back a little bit on the smart retargeting this year and invested quite a bit more in PPC because we were quite frankly underspending in some of our markets. And
Yeah.
it's kind of been a little bit of a trial where we've also expected to see a decrease in leads, and we've accepted that that's okay because theoretically we're getting more qualified traffic that's coming through. So even if the numbers are smaller, if the conversion ratios are improving, then I'm happy. As a marketer, that's a hard thing to come to terms with because I think it's reinforced like more leads, more leads. That's how we see success. And I've shifted maybe a little bit more this quarter to, right, I'm getting more leads, but maybe move-ins aren't increasing to the point where I need them to. So what's going on? Am I not really driving the qualified leads that my communities need? What can I refocus on or optimize to change that? And so year to date, we've seen a 17% increase in move-ins. And that's the number that I'm focusing on now is year over year Q1, 17% increase in move-ins. That to me says we're doing something differently either at the marketing side or the sales side that is driving more conversion. So naturally, as a marketer, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at the data for Q1 year over year and really figure out how to duplicate the things that are working well. But really excited about, the performance overall, and I'm excited for the innovations that seem to constantly be developing. And I know Google always keeps us on our toes, so I'm sure I'll have to continue optimizing those campaigns as well. Generally positive so far.
That's great. That's so awesome to hear. Yeah, I think that's an important point too. I mean, you saw a 36% increase in leads, but only a 17% increase in move-ins. I think that's a really important point for people to recognize that it's not going to be a one-to-one
Mm-hmm.
ratio. If you increase leads, you're not inherently just going to increase move-ins. There's so many steps and so many touch points in the sales process for senior living that for us, it's really, okay, how many leads book tours? That's the
Right,
metric for us. If we can increase the number of tours, we know absolutely the people who tour, there's a way higher percentage that they're going to move in than someone who doesn't.
right.
So those are the ones we want to focus on and get more of. And like you were saying, what created that 36% increase? There could have been 10 things you did that all were working, but maybe there were 3 things out of the 10 that were really working well. So figuring out what those 3 things were
Yeah.
and leaning into those more than the others, I think that's so important to really dig into the data and see that. And for paid search too, well, you said a lot in there, so I need to rewind. Facebook, we have stopped running Facebook and only done Facebook retargeting because I agree, it's the direct Facebook, it casts such a wide net, because you can't, it's not like Google ads where somebody's typing in senior living near me or something like that, and you're serving an ad directly to somebody who's looking for it. With Facebook, you're just throwing it out there to anyone within a certain age range in a certain area who might be interested in senior living, but there's no guarantee that that's actually something that they're looking for. So it's a little bit of a hit or miss when it comes to lead quality. But the retargeting, that's someone who's been on your site. They're already interested, and now you're just reminding them, hey, we're here,
Mm-hmm.
come check us out. So that's been successful for us as well. And then investing higher amounts into paid search, I absolutely think that's a smart way to go because the competition is increasing every day. And when it comes to the number of older adults and their children who are looking for care, and then the number of facilities that are opening up. I mean, just from 2014 to 2024, I think there was a 30% increase in the number of facilities that opened up across the US. And that might have just been an assisted living statistic. So if you just imagine all
Mm-hmm.
the other care options that are out there, it's
Right.
insane how much this industry is growing. And we know by 2040, we're going to probably need to double that number. So the amount of competition out there is increasing. And because of that, people are looking at more options. They're not just looking at 2 or 3 communities anymore. Now they're looking at like 5 or 7. So that's probably part of the reason why we're seeing lower conversion rates on our move-ins than we are on the leads that we're
Mm-hmm.
generating, because people are interested, but they've got so many options now that it's almost like analysis paralysis. They don't know which one
Right.
to go to, or they just decide on one of the other ones because they've looked at so many, they all start to blend in and feel the same. So standing out is super important. I think paid search does a great job with that, because if you can get an ad directly at the top of Google, it's the first thing they see when they put that search term in. Even if they don't click on the ad, if they see your brand name up there and then maybe they see you in the organic results, it's just brand repetition.
Right.
So there's so many benefits to it. I think more providers should be spending more with paid search than most other ad platforms.
That brings up an interesting point. How do we convince our prospects and families that they do not need to look at every single option as part of their journey, and it's okay to pick two or three that you align with most? Like, what are we failing at that is making them think that they have to look at six, seven, eight different communities before making a decision?
Yeah, I think brand differentiation is the issue. I think a lot of communities, they all say the same thing. They all have the same amenities. The language with caring staff, we've got 24/7 dining, we've got this, we've got, pet friendly community. They all offer that now. So what's different about your community, and how can you articulate that in a different way? So yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge. The value proposition is so similar across the board for so many communities. Maybe that's just the truth of the situation, right? I mean, we're creating more communities because we have an influx of older adults, whereas before we were creating communities to assimilate to a specific lifestyle,
Right.
right? But now it's like we just need housing. So it's kind of like a different search now. I think people are just in a different mindset,
That's
maybe.
fair.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of both going on, I think. But besides just organic search and paid search, you're also utilizing Google business profiles and FAQs to engage more qualified leads right from search. How is that working for you?
Yeah, so we have focused on optimizing each of our profiles with consistent info, accurate info, recent info. And that stems from photos on our end, service details, products, but also reviews, and really focusing on those campaigns within the communities where they get the reviews and we respond to them, and increasing our visibility and brand authenticity that way. The other aspect that we've recently started to focus on is using the FAQ section to answer questions at the moment of search. And so I talked about empowering our prospects and their family members who are starting their search, and maybe they don't know what questions to ask. Maybe they do have specific questions in their mind. They tend to have some commonalities across each, user journey. And so making sure that those are addressed immediately before they visit the website, they already have the answer to their question that they maybe had top of mind. Focus on, oh gosh, I didn't even know that was going to be a question, but I want to learn more about this. Or they can focus on, really the feeling that the website exudes, as opposed to hunting for specific, information to get the answer to their question. I think there is still this fear of picking up the phone and calling, and we just try to exude, that comfortability of the approachable, community that you can call to really get that support and act as a guide for you, and not necessarily pressure you about, scheduling a tour or essentially moving in, because maybe it's not the right fit, and, maybe we can help support and guide you through the correct journey to make sure that you find the support that you need.
I've noticed in the last couple of years, there's been far less people who are picking up the phone and calling, and now more people are engaging with the chat bots and engaging through the forums and the surveys and things like that to request more information or to get more information from the community without actually having to engage with someone on the phone. Are you seeing that on your end?
Absolutely. Professionally
Yeah.
and personally. If I don't have to pick up the phone and call someone, I'm not going to. And I work in marketing. I've worked in sales. I should feel comfortable, but I
Yeah.
don't, quite honestly. If I can send you a message through your website, or if I get the answers that I need from the website, I'm much happier to do that and interact with you virtually until the point of my appointment, and that's fine with me. I don't need to have a conversation, over the phone. I'd prefer not to, and I think that is common in this industry. But I think it's up to us to ensure that we honor their approach. And so if they would prefer to interact via email, that's fine with us. We don't need to be calling incessantly and leaving
Yeah.
voicemails or texting. And so we're sure to ask that question. And I think that's a standard, right? But then not just ask it and see what their preferred, method of contact is, but to honor it and make sure that if someone says they prefer to interact via email, they mean it. Let's ensure we're reaching out via email, and, ultimately, if we're not able to get a hold of them, the next step would be a text message. And if they wanted to really give you a call and pick up the phone, they would have done that by now. So I think as an industry, it's something that we probably just need to accept and work toward a solution to how to get around the lack of phone calls and how to engage online and via those digital formats.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And I think there's platforms out there like Talk Further. We've worked with them quite a bit for a lot of our communities and being able to answer those questions up front. I think it honestly goes back to what I was saying about there just being an influx of communities out there and more people looking and searching, and there being more of an exigent need because there's less availability now than there was in terms of occupancy for a lot of communities. I think people are resource gathering and information gathering, and I just think it's easier for people just to hop on a chat or fill out a form than it is for them to talk to 10 different communities. It's almost like buying insurance. I don't want to be harassed by 10 different
Right.
communities. And even if that's not what the community's doing, that's what it feels like when you have 10 different people calling you and you're like, oh, who are you from? Which community are you with again? I don't even remember looking at that one.
What did I
You know?
set off here?
Yeah, like, oh no. Well, that's one of the things with working with referral partners, like a place for mom. That's the biggest complaint people have is they fill out the form one time and then they get 25 different salespeople calling them. They instantly regret their choice, even though it's free. It's buyer's remorse right out of the gate.
And it
So that gives them a
automatically
really bad,
there's a
yeah,
negative impression or connotation of the
yeah.
journey, right? They're already more overwhelmed than they were when they started, and they're frustrated, and that's not a great way to start off such an impactful and emotional journey for them.
No, absolutely not. Kind of zooming out to like the 30,000 foot view, what are the questions you think more senior living providers should be asking their marketing partners but aren't?
Yeah, I think the most important one is how are we building trust and rapport at every step of the marketing strategy? I think a lot of times that focus is left to the sales leaders in the communities, and it really does start from that first interaction and not necessarily just the website. Even further than that, if, they're searching a set, key phrase and our ad pops up, does the messaging there reflect what they're about to see on the website, they're about to see in the communities, and what they're about to feel through the interactions with each of the, members of the community they speak to? So I think that's an important thing to focus on, is really aligning your messaging with your brand strategy, your identity, and the expectations and offerings of your community. The second piece, I think, is how are we measuring impact beyond just clicks? And we talked about this a little bit, that feedback loop. I think there's still a significant lack of communication between our marketing technology and sales technology platforms in this industry, where I can't get the full view of lead attribution. And it has maintained the bane of my existence of trying to figure out
all of us.
Right? But why is it so difficult for this industry? And is it something, that we're each dealing with individually trying to solve for? Or is there a greater need for, our partners to step up and say, this is what all of my operators seem to be dealing with. How do we solve this problem? How do we collaborate to make sure that our systems speak together? We're not making them do the work to really drive these integrations and they become the solution. I think there's a lane there. There's an opportunity, and it doesn't exist yet. If it does, let me know. But to my knowledge, I haven't found that full lead attribution model, that full circle view into, our leads journey from first interaction to move-in.
Yeah, nothing that's automated anyways, that's for sure. It's super
But yeah, I could
frustrating.
pull a bunch of reports and put together
Yeah,
my own, right? But
exactly.
it defeats the purpose a little.
What are you most excited about right now in your role or within the senior living industry?
I think I'm most excited about the opportunity to blend technology and innovation with empathy and, genuine compassion in our storytelling. So I've talked a lot about, humanizing marketing and intent. I think that there is an opportunity there to pull back a little bit from looking for the next best thing as far as, technology and what we could add and stack onto our already full marketing tech platforms. Instead, focus on how we're leveraging those partners and the messaging behind that, the intent behind it. And I think that's something that I'm most excited about to continue diving into and to continue sharing that opportunity with my marketing connections in the industry and talking through what they're doing that's working well. I think we do a wonderful job of networking in this industry to the point where
Oh,
we're
yeah.
transparent with each other. We share what's working and what's not. And I think that's something that, we wouldn't find in most other industries. And so I love that. I thrive on that. I think we all align on our approach to a human-centered marketing strategy. It's just really driving through the details of how to make sure that's actually happening through each of our campaigns and strategies.
This is the least competitive industry I've ever worked in. Everyone is right there to help you up no matter what. Everybody wants to share what's working for them. I think there's just such an abundance mindset here. And I don't know if that's what it is, but whatever it is, I'm here for it. I love it. Ever
Yeah.
since I've been working with this industry, every event I go to, it's such a great experience to meet people and to talk through these things, right? I have so
Yep.
many contacts that are in marketing, in senior living, who are all experiencing the same challenges or problems, and we're all working together to solve these, and it's so great.
It is. And, I read something the other day about the role of marketers as relationship builders and not just lead generators. And I think that exudes into the marketing industry, into the senior living industry as well. We build relationships with each other and we support each other just as much as we're working on, building those relationships with our prospects and our communities as a whole.
I love that. That's great. Meg, thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation. This was really great.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I was happy to be here and participate, and it was a great conversation. I'm going to go back through and look through all of my data now and find those 3 things that worked well. And
Yeah, I'm curious. You don't have to let me know. So for those who want to stay connected with you or learn more about what you're doing, where should they go?
yeah, I am on LinkedIn, Meg Harper, and that's where I am the most active.
Awesome. All right. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to extend a huge thank you to you, Meg Harper, for joining us and sharing your insights on humanizing digital marketing, aligning teams, and building authentic connection through strategy and storytelling. If you'd like to connect with Meg, check out the links in the show notes. As always, we hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore the evolving world of senior care, covering everything from innovative care models and leadership strategies to family support, technology, and the future of aging. Also, remember that From Lease to Leases isn't just an audio experience, we're also a video podcast. So if you want to see the video versions of our episodes like the one here with Meg, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube or Spotify channels. I'm Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. Thank you for joining us on From Leads to Leases, and please like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it useful. I'm truly grateful for your time and attention. Until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you again soon. Thanks, Meg.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks for listening to From Leads to Leases. Are you ready to fill your rooms faster and increase occupancy? Visit ccrgrowth.com to learn about our Senior Growth Innovation Suite, a proven system to generate highly qualified, tour-ready leads, accelerate sales, and reduce acquisition costs. Let's connect and turn your challenges into opportunities. See you next time.